7 years of marriage destroyed in just 7 minutes. It took exactly that long for me to watch the security camera footage from my BMW and realize my life was a lie. The technology I installed to protect my car ended up protecting my dignity. This isn't an easy story to tell, but maybe it will help someone going through the same thing, or serve as a warning for anyone who blindly trusts their partner. Subscribe to the channel and hit like for more stories like this. Amanda and I met in business school. After 3 years of dating, we got married in a simple ceremony with only close family and friends around. Our life was pretty chill. I worked for a consulting firm that had me traveling a lot while she ran a law office. On weekends, we'd watch movies, visit friends, or just hang out together. Communication was always our strong point. We told each other everything, or so I thought. Trust was the foundation of our relationship. I remember conversations where Amanda told me she admired my confidence, especially since I never got jealous when I was away. "I trust you completely," I would always say, and I really meant it. Our arguments were rare and usually sorted out quickly with a good talk. Our friends even called us the perfect couple. Ironic to think about now. In March last year, I came back from a 3-day trip to Chicago. It was Thursday when I noticed something weird about the car. A noise from the engine that hadn't been there before. I asked Amanda that very night during dinner, "Did you use the BMW while I was gone?" She hesitated just a second, almost imperceptibly. "I just went to Melissa's house on Tuesday night. I missed her, so we chatted for a few hours." "Why?" "I'm hearing this strange noise from the engine, that's all." "Must be your imagination." I drove less than 20 kilometers at most. The next morning, I took the car to Dave's workshop, the mechanic I've known for years. After a quick look, he confirmed something was wrong. It wasn't a small problem. Something was off with the transmission. "Have you been driving the car a lot recently, Jack? The odometer shows almost 200 extra kilometers since the last time you brought it in." I was confused. I was sure the mileage was practically the same as when I left. Dave noticed my expression and added, "Hey, you installed that security camera I recommended, right? Maybe you should check out the footage." That night, with Amanda sleeping in the bedroom, I hooked up the camera to my laptop. The device, discreetly installed on the dashboard, recorded whenever the car was in motion. I started watching the footage from Tuesday, the day she said she'd been at Melissa's. At 7 p.m., Amanda really drove over to her friend's place. I sighed with relief but decided to keep watching. At 11:00 p.m., she left there, but didn't come back home. The footage showed her picking up 2 other friends and heading to a nightclub downtown. Up to that point, it was nothing more than a little lie about going out with friends. At the club, the camera just caught her parking the car, but started rolling again when Amanda got back in. She wasn't alone. A tall guy I'd never seen before got into the front seat next to her. They kissed passionately. My stomach churned as I watched my wife caress a stranger's face in my own car. "My husband won't be back until tomorrow night," she whispered between kisses. "We can go to that hotel on Main Street." The camera kept recording for a few more minutes, showing them on their way to the hotel. They got out of the car at 3:00 a.m. The next clip showed Amanda coming home alone at 7:30 a.m., just an hour before I'd normally be up for work. I spent the whole weekend acting like nothing had happened. I needed to process what I'd seen, to understand it all. On Monday, when Amanda left for work, I rewatched all the recordings from the past month. I found 2 more nights of going out, even though in those, she only went to bars with friends. There wasn't any proof of other encounters with men, but the suspicion had already set in. On Tuesday night, I put the recordings on the living room TV and waited for Amanda to get home. When she walked in, I hit play without saying a word. "What is this?" she asked until she recognized herself on the video. Her face went pale. "Jack, I can explain. Please, explain how you said you only went to Melissa's house when you actually ended up in bed with a stranger." "I drank too much that night. The girls pushed me to go to the club. I met Eric there. It was a mistake, one single mistake. I wasn't thinking straight. A mistake that you planned ahead, considering you told him I wouldn't be back until the next day." Her eyes filled with tears. "It was only once. I swear. I was feeling so lonely. You travel so much. How many other times, Amanda? How many more lies? How can I trust anything you say now?" For the next week, I slept in the guest room. I needed space to think, to figure out what had happened to our 7-year marriage. Amanda tried several times to start a conversation. She caught up with me when I left for work, left notes on the bedside table, sent messages that I deliberately ignored. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep sense of mourning for something I realized had been dead for a long time. On Friday, I decided I was ready for the final talk. I called Amanda into the living room after dinner. which we ate in silence just like every other night that week. I've spent these days thinking about us, I started, keeping my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I tried to find a way to move on, to rebuild what we had. Amanda looked at me hopefully. We can get past this, Jack. It was a terrible mistake, but I can prove I deserve your trust again. We can do couples therapy. I'll be completely transparent about everything. No, I interrupted firmly. It's not about what you did that night. It's about the lies. You looked me in the eyes and lied so naturally. About where you were, about the car, about everything. If it weren't for the camera, I'd never have known. And that makes me wonder, how many other lies were there during these 7 years? Amanda, I swear that I can't trust your swears anymore, Amanda. Every word you say now is filtered by this doubt. I'll never know if I'm hearing the truth or just another convenient lie. A heavy silence stretched between us for a few seconds. Amanda wiped away a tear before speaking again. So, is that it? Is it over? Yes, it's over. I kept my voice firm as I explained what would happen next. You have 2 options. The first is to do this the civilized way. Minimal contact through lawyers, a fair division of our assets, with no one needing to know the real reason beyond irreconcilable differences. And the second option? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. I can take these recordings to court. My lawyer said this could seriously affect the asset division in states that consider infidelity in divorce. I can also show them to our friends, your family, your co-workers. It wouldn't be revenge. It'd just be the truth. I saw fear flash in her eyes. I wasn't trying to threaten her. I just needed her to understand there was no negotiating with the end of our marriage. I wouldn't do that to you, she pleaded. Just like you wouldn't betray my trust? I shook my head. I'm not threatening. I'm offering a dignified way for both of us to move on. The choice is yours. At that moment, I realized the power had shifted completely. For years, without me even noticing, Amanda had manipulated our dynamic. Now, finally, I was taking control of my own life again. I want the first option, she said after a few moments of silence. We can handle this discreetly. I'm moving to a hotel tomorrow and will call my lawyer on Monday. I suggest you do the same. In the days that followed, the process started formally. Amanda left our apartment 2 weeks later, taking only her personal belongings and a few pieces of furniture we had agreed would be hers. Our mutual friends were shocked by the news, but I kept to my side of the agreement and only mentioned irreconcilable differences. Some tried to reconcile us, not understanding the gravity of what had happened. Others seemed to already know or suspect something, which made me wonder how many people were aware of the double life Amanda was leading. The divorce was finalized 3 months later, faster than I ever expected. I signed the papers on a rainy Wednesday, and then drove to the beach to stare out at the ocean for a few hours. I wasn't celebrating. I was saying goodbye to a significant part of my life, to dreams that would never come true, to a future I had planned for years. The first few months after the divorce were surprisingly productive. I threw myself into work like never before, taking on international projects I'd normally pass on, and staying at the office way later than needed. My colleagues kept talking about my renewed dedication, not realizing it was just a way to avoid facing the empty apartment waiting for me at night. Business trips, once a source of guilt for leaving Amanda alone, became my refuge. In nondescript hotel rooms in foreign cities, I didn't have to confront the memories that haunted every corner of our old home. I even took a temporary transfer to our Singapore office. Even though it meant 6 months on the other side of the world, it was exactly what I needed. It was in Singapore, ironically thousands of kilometers away, that reality finally caught up with me. I woke up in the middle of the night with an anxiety attack so intense, I thought I was having a heart attack. The hotel doctor made it plain. Built-up stress, exhaustion, unprocessed emotional trauma. You can keep running, he said in a light British accent. But eventually your body is going to force you to stop. That very week, I started therapy with an American expat psychologist. During the first sessions, I could barely talk about Amanda without feeling a crushing pressure in my chest. Dr. Sarah didn't rush me. She let me circle around the subject, slowly focusing on little parts of the betrayal. It's not just the cheating that's affecting you, she observed after a few weeks. It's the fundamental shattering of your worldview. You built your identity on trust and being someone who can be trusted. What happened didn't just break up your marriage. It shook your very sense of yourself and how the world works. She was right. I began to see how the betrayal had completely changed the way I interacted with people. I started questioning the intentions of colleagues I'd once called friends. I analyzed every conversation obsessively for signs of inconsistencies or lies. Even casual interactions with strangers were viewed through this new lens of distrust. The worst were the dreams. I often dreamt about Amanda in that guy's arms. Sometimes I'd wake up in a panic. Other times I'd be trapped in the nightmare for hours. Occasionally, I even dreamt that I'd never discovered the betrayal, continuing happily in my ignorance. And those were the most disturbing of all. 5 months after I got to Singapore, I received an unexpected message from Amanda. It was her birthday, and she was thanking me for a bouquet that I hadn't sent. Apparently, the flower subscription service I had set up at the beginning of our marriage was still running. After sorting out that small mix-up with the florist, I realized that I no longer felt that sharp pain when I saw her name pop up on my screen. It was more like a distant ache, a scar that still itched sometimes but no longer bled. When my assignment in Singapore ended, I decided not to go back immediately. I took a month off, the first real break in almost 2 years, and traveled around Southeast Asia by myself. In a small village on the coast of Vietnam, sitting on an empty beach, I wrote a letter to Amanda that I never intended to send. I poured out my anger, my disappointment, the questions that still tormented me. And finally, something close to forgiveness. Not for her, but for myself. I burned the letter at sunset and scattered the ashes into the sea. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, not completely, but enough that I could finally breathe a bit easier. When I got back to the United States, I didn't return to the same city. I accepted a promotion at our company's headquarters in Boston, a place where I had no ties, where I could truly start over. I found an apartment with a view of the Charles River and began to rebuild my life, one day at a time. Eventually, I settled into a new routine. Morning runs along the river, cooking classes on Tuesday nights, and a book club on Sundays. My family worried about my seeming isolation, especially my sister Elise, who kept pushing me to get back into the dating scene. I patiently explained that I wasn't hiding. I was healing, learning to trust my own judgment again before trusting someone else. "But it's been almost 2 years, Jack," she insisted during a visit to Boston. "You can't let what Amanda did define the rest of your life." "I'm not letting it," I said as we prepared dinner together. "I'm just making sure that when I'm ready, it's because I've healed, not because I'm running from loneliness or trying to prove something to myself." One October afternoon, exactly 2 years after the divorce, I found myself watching those security camera recordings again. I'm not exactly sure what drove me to dig up that digital file I'd promised myself I'd never open again. Maybe it was my way of checking on my emotional progress, of testing whether it still hurt as much as it used to. To my surprise, I watched the footage with a strange sense of detachment, as if I were seeing someone else's story. I recognized the characters. My ex-wife, the unknown guy, my old car. But the emotional impact was completely different. The pain had given way to a deeper understanding, not just of what happened, but of what it meant for me now. Amanda's betrayal tore apart the foundations of what I believed was real. For so long, I had only focused on the destruction, the ruins of what we had built together. But now, I could finally see past the wreckage. The truth is, our relationship had started to crack long before that fateful night. The camera just exposed what I'd been refusing to see. I'm not trying to downplay what she did. The cheating and all the lies that followed were deliberate choices that hurt me deeply. But I also recognized that we both were part of a dynamic that let our marriage become ground for such behavior. My frequent absences, my almost careless trust, my reluctance to confront small inconsistencies over the years, all of that created an environment where dishonesty could thrive without immediate fallout. The most valuable lesson I learned wasn't about distrusting people, it was about discernment. There's a crucial difference between blindly trusting and trusting consciously. The first ignores warning signs and shirks responsibility. The second means staying alert without becoming paranoid, noticing problematic patterns without turning controlling. I also learned about resilience. There's a special kind of strength that comes out only when you're forced to rebuild something you once thought unbreakable. In that first year after everything came out, I honestly believed I'd never fully recover. Every morning was a battle against sinking into bitterness and resentment. Every social interaction felt like a test for my newfound cynicism. But time, along with therapy, self-discovery, and eventually forgiveness, proved that we're way more adaptable than we think. The pain doesn't completely vanish, it changes. It becomes part of our story, guides our future decisions, but it doesn't have to define who we are or limit our ability to connect. Perhaps the most surprising realization was about the nature of truth. When I first discovered everything, I was obsessed with facts, details, exact timelines. How many times had she cheated on me? How long had it been going on? Who else knew? I believed that if I could get all the answers, maybe the situation would be easier to handle, easier to understand. Eventually, I realized that those questions were just desperate attempts to rationalize something completely irrational. The way people we love can hurt us. Some truths can never be fully known. The real reasons behind Amanda's actions, the full extent of what she did, the exact moment our marriage started to crumble. And I had to learn to live with that uncertainty. The same security camera I installed to protect a material possession ended up revealing the devastating truth that tore my entire marriage apart. My wife wasn't just blatantly cheating on me. She lied to my face with such icy detachment that it made me wonder if I ever really knew her. Looking back, those 7 minutes of video marked both an ending and a beginning. They closed a huge chapter of my life, but also opened up possibilities I'd never explored otherwise. The international career I built, the places I traveled to, the genuine friendships I made. Many of these life-changing experiences came straight out of the ashes of that failed relationship. I wouldn't wish anyone the experience of discovering a betrayal like this. Having your world turned upside down in just a few minutes is something I wouldn't wish on even my worst enemy. But I also recognize that, paradoxically, that very devastation allowed me to rebuild a more authentic life, one that's more in tune with my values and aspirations. Subscribe to the channel and hit like for more stories like this. I'm sharing this story not to demonize Amanda or to paint myself as a helpless victim, but because I know many of you have faced or might face similar situations. Betrayal is a painfully common experience. The statistics show it affects more relationships than we'd like to admit. If you're watching this and going through something similar right now, I want you to know a few things. First, the pain you feel is completely valid. Don't let anyone downplay your experience or tell you you're exaggerating. The breakdown of trust in an intimate relationship causes a very real kind of trauma that can change how we view the world. Second, you're not alone on this journey, even if it seems that way right now. There's a whole community of people who have been through it. They understand exactly what you're feeling. Finding others who've experienced something similar was a key part of my recovery, whether it was through support groups, online communities, or honest conversations with friends who had been there. Third, there's no right timeline for healing. Some people process betrayal and move on relatively fast. Others take years to rebuild their trust. Respect your own pace. The only way out is through the experience. There's no shortcut around the pain. For those who haven't experienced anything like this, let this story serve as a reminder of how important honesty is in a relationship. Betrayal rarely happens in a vacuum. It's usually preceded by small disconnects, seemingly innocent secrets, and boundaries that were slowly crossed. Building genuine communication from the start can help prevent the kind of distance that makes cheating possible. I'd love to know how you'd handle a situation like what I went through. Would you have confronted Amanda immediately after seeing the footage? Would you try to save the relationship through counseling? Or would you take the same path I did? There's no one-size-fits-all answer. Every relationship is different, and what worked for me might not be right for someone else. One final thought. For a long time, I thought that day was the worst day of my life. Now, I see it differently, like the day when the truth, however painful it was, finally came to light. There's something liberating about facing reality, even when it shatters the most cherished illusions. If my story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might be going through a similar situation. Sometimes, knowing that someone else has survived that storm can give the hope you need to keep going. And for those curious about where I am now, yes, eventually I found the courage to trust again. Not in the same way, no more blind, unconditional trust, but in a more mature, aware way that accepts both human betrayal and genuine loyalty. It was a gradual process with the occasional setback, but each step forward was a small victory over fear and distrust. Leave your own story or thoughts in the comments. How did you cope with betrayal? What helped you move on? Or, if you're in the middle of this storm, what has been the most challenging for you? This community can be a place of support for all of us who have experienced the painful shock of realizing that the person we trusted the most wasn't who we thought they were. Thanks for joining me on this journey of vulnerability. Sometimes, the most painful stories are the ones that need to be told, not just for our own healing, but to show others that they too can find a way through the darkness. Subscribe to the channel and hit like for more stories like this.